Hi, I'm Jimmy Aluria here at 3A Automotive and Diesel Repair. We get a lot of questions about alternator and charging issues or battery issues. So today I'm going to answer some of the most common ones to help you better understand how to keep your vehicle reliable and safe. What are the most common symptoms of a failing alternator? The most common symptoms of a failing alternator sometimes can be dimming lights, meaning the interior lights or your headlights, maybe a battery that keeps dying. Usually there'll be a warning light on a modern vehicle that is telling you if there's an alternator issue, but sometimes you have a weak electrical power. Maybe your windows aren't going up as fast as they should be, showing that the battery is getting weak because it's not getting charged up properly. And sometimes you'll have a stalling issue where the battery is not charged properly and the alternator is not keeping that battery full. So that could be a symptom that the alternator is not charging the battery. You have an alternator problem. Why does my battery keep dying even after replacing it? If your battery keeps dying even after you've replaced it, it's a sign that probably there's something else going on with the system. Either the alternator is not recharging the battery, so when the car started, it's pulling all the energy out of the battery and it's not being replenished, or you have some sort of a draw, meaning that there's a light on or there's something in the computer system that's always staying on and it's pulling a little bit of energy out of that battery when it's not being recharged. And so it seems like you have a bad battery, but actually there's something pulling energy out of the battery when it's not being recharged. What does it mean when the battery or charging light turns on? If your battery light or your charging system light turns on in the car, it's telling you there's something wrong with the charging system. Either the battery's going bad and it's not accepting a charge, or you've got a problem with the alternator or something else in the electrical system that's causing that light to come on. It's a good sign you better get it into a repair shop, find out what's going on, otherwise it's going to probably leave you stranded. Why does my car lose power or stall while driving? If your car loses power or stalls while you're driving, it could be a multitude of issues. It could be something going on with the battery or the alternator or the charging system, but it also could be something with the fuel system or the fuel pump or some sort of electrical issue. It's a wide range of things that could cause that, so it's a good idea to get it checked out as soon as possible. How can I tell if the issue is my alternator or my battery? The way you can tell the difference between an alternator or a battery is typically, if it's a battery issue, the car won't start. If you've got a battery that's bad, you'll go to turn the car over and it'll either won't start or it'll be very slow to start. Typically, if it's an alternator issue, your car will run until the battery loses all of its energy because it's not being replenished by the alternator. And the alternator is not recharging the battery. Eventually, that car will have a hard time running, if run at all. Most of the modern vehicles need the battery to even run properly. And so you'll start seeing running issues because that battery is draining down while it's running because the alternator is not recharging it. So typically, if it's a battery issue, you're going to see it right away when you go to start it. If it's an alternator issue, it'll start, but then it starts having issues after it's been running for a little while. What causes an alternator to fail prematurely? Well, there's a couple things that cause an alternator to fail prematurely. Number one, if you don't put a quality alternator back on the vehicle. Today's modern vehicle requires a lot from the alternator and recharging that battery because of all the computers on the car. So everything's electrical. So you got to put a good quality alternator on there that will last. The other thing that we find is that when there's a leak, a lot of times you'll get some sort of an oil leak that's leaking onto the alternator, and there's nothing wrong with the alternator. It would normally last a long time, but because there's something leaking on that alternator, it fails way too early, way sooner than it should. So the key to that is you want to make sure that if you have a leak and it's dripping on that alternator in any way, shape, or form, you got to fix that leak before it causes that alternator to fail. Why do my headlights dim or flicker when I'm driving? Your headlights will dim or flicker typically when there's some sort of a charging issue or a battery issue. It could be both. It could be if a battery is not accepting a charge, then those lights are going to have a hard time operating because the lights are actually operating off of the battery. At the same time, if there's an alternator issue, if it's spiking, there's too much energy going into the battery, into the system because the alternator is going bad, or not enough, it'll also cause those lights to flicker or be too dim. So if your headlights are flickering or dim, it's a good chance that you want to get it into the shop to have it checked out to find out exactly what's going on. How does the alternator affect the electrical systems in my car? The alternator affects almost everything in the electrical system of your car. Cars today run off of the batteries. All the electrical systems are drawing from the battery. They're getting that energy from the battery. And if the alternator is not operating properly, it's not replenishing that energy in the battery, and it's going to cause all kinds of problems. So the alternator's job is to mainly keep the battery full of charge as it's using energy to operate the computers and all the electrical systems in the vehicle. Can a weak alternator cause rough idling or poor performance? A weak alternator can definitely cause rough idling or poor performance, mostly because it's not replenishing the energy into the battery. The battery is where everything's hooked up, so all the electrical energy is coming from the battery. But if that alternator is not replenishing that energy properly, fast enough, then you could have an idle problem or poor performance in the vehicle. What should I do if my car dies at a stoplight or won't stay running? If your car dies at a stoplight or won't stay running, it's a good chance that you have either a running problem with the fuel system or you've got some sort of electrical issue. What you need to do right then and there is you need to stop and get the vehicle towed to a repair shop. It's not a good idea to drive it any further if it won't stay running because it's pulling too much energy. Likely the battery's dead or you've got an alternator problem, and it could put you in a safety situation if you're on the road and there's someplace you can't get off of the road because it's dying. So if it's not running, if you can get it started, pull over and have it towed because it could cause more trouble later. How often should the charging system be inspected? The charging system should be inspected about every time you get an oil change. If there's no lights on and there's no apparent issues like a running issue or a starting issue, then you're not going to really think about if there's a problem. But batteries will just all of a sudden stop taking a charge, or they'll all of a sudden go dead. So typically every 3,000 to 5,000 miles during an oil change at 3A Automotive, we'll hook up our battery and charging system tester to make sure that everything's properly operating. So about every 3 to 5 miles, about every 6 months, you should definitely have your charging system inspected. What happens if I continue driving with a failing alternator? If your alternator is failing, eventually the car is going to drain all the energy out of that battery. And if it's not already running poorly, it's going to start running poorly. So if you continue driving with a failing alternator, eventually you're going to have a dead battery because the car operates off of the battery. So a good idea is if you have a failing alternator and you have enough energy in the battery to maybe get you home or get it to a repair shop, do that, because eventually the car is going to be undrivable. And then if you go to try and start it again, all the energy out of the battery is going to be gone and you're not going to be able to start the vehicle. I hope this video helped answer some of your biggest questions about alternator and charging system and battery issues. If you'd like to schedule an appointment to check your charging system or have us inspect your vehicle, give us a call here at 3A Automotive and Diesel Repair, 602-997-7978. We're here to keep your vehicles reliable and safe.